Alright, so these are going to be my Week 7 UFL Power Rankings. Let's get started. Starting off here with our top performances, I'm going to go over the quarterbacks, but you guys can look at anything else you want to look at. Luis Perez was not great. Only 145 yards with 3 turnovers this week. Not ideal. Max Dugan was fine, although his completion percentage of 7 for 19 is very, very poor. Dresser Wynn was solid once again. He did have 2 turnovers, but he also had 2 touchdowns and 200 yards. So I can't be too upset about those turnovers. Jalen McClendon was pretty good. Good completion percentage with a touchdown this week. Tiamu had, a lot of yards, 2 touchdowns. His completion percentage, like usual, was pretty bad, but not too upset. Bryce Perkins was amazing, always. He had over 250 total yards with 3 touchdowns. Amazing. Kevin Hogan was decent, 180 yards of interception this week, but, it's his first game, and he looked better than any other Browns quarterback so far this season. Case Cookis was pretty good, 166 yards and 2 touchdowns there, but he also did split some time with Andrew Peasley, who looked decent in his limited time. Moving on from there, I'll get myself in picture here. We have the San Antonio Brahmas at number 8. So they're 1-5, and they played pretty bad this week. They got demolished 26-3 versus the Birmingham Stallions. They only put up 178 yards of offense. That is pretty atrocious. Also had 2 turnovers, right? This team is not very good, and they showed that once again this week. Like I said, I do think Kevin Hogan looked better than Kellen Mond has for them, but that's still not good enough for them to be winning any games. Next up is the Memphis Showboats at number 7. They were number 7 a week ago. They had a pretty good game. They only lost by 1 point, 21-20 versus the Houston Roughnecks. They actually outgained them by 80 yards, but they did have 2 turnovers, which, very much made the difference in a 1-point game. So you kind of are upset about that a little bit, but again, the Showboats did not have high expectations coming into this season, and they've at least been pretty competitive these last few weeks. Number 6 is the Arlington Renegades at 3-3. They're going to drop 2 spots. They played the St. Louis Battlehawks and lost 12-6. So defensively, holding them to only 12 points, solid. But putting up 6 points and having 4 offensive turnovers is very, very atrocious. Luis Perez had 3 of those turnovers, right? This is probably one of the worst games he's played in modern spring football, at least in a long time. So not very excited about that for Renegades fans, obviously, and for Luis Perez fans, which I classify myself as a Luis Perez fan, and he did not play very good this week, which is very disappointing. Next up, we got the Houston Roughnecks actually jumping up 1 spot to number 5. They beat the Showboats 21-20. Like I said earlier, they got outgained by 80 yards, but they had 2 takeaways and 0 turnovers on offense. Doing really good offensively, taking care of the ball and moving the ball down the field. And defensively, again, 2 takeaways, really, really good for Houston. They've been looking really good ever since Jalen McClendon took over as starting quarterback. Next up is the Birmingham Stallions at number 4. They're going to jump up 1 spot after they dominated the Brahmas 26-3, and they outgained them by about 150 yards. So pretty much domination throughout this entire game for Birmingham. Case Cookis looked really good. Andrew Peasley looked solid in the limited time he played as well before he did end up getting injured as well. But Birmingham looked really good. You could definitely argue them being up a little bit higher, but 4 through 2 are very, very interchangeable in my opinion. Number 3 is going to be the DC Defenders, dropping from 1 down to 3. They got demolished here, 38-14 by the Michigan Panthers. They did put up, 325 yards of offense with 0 turnovers. Right, so based off of those numbers, you would expect them to have more than only 14 points. But they just could not finish those drives with points. Now, they also allowed 400 yards defensively and 38 points, which is obviously not very good. And every single week, the defenders have allowed more and more points. So based on that trajectory, they're going to be allowing 40 points next week, which is obviously, not good if that does happen. Number 2 is the St. Louis Battlehawks. They're going to jump up 1 spot. They had a good game against the Renegades, 12-6 win. Not very good, really, offensively, but 12 points isn't great. Only 170 yards is not very good, obviously, right? But they did only have one turnover, and they had 4 defensive takeaways, which obviously was the difference maker in this game. Their defense is dominating. Their offense has been pretty inconsistent. Max Duggan has been pretty inconsistent, but it's been good enough because of their amazing defense to go out and get them some wins still. So, not too worried about them, but I would like to see them get more than 170 yards of offense going forward. Number 1 is the Michigan Panthers. They're going to obviously jump up one here. They dominated the defenders 38-14, had 400 yards of offense, 0 turnovers. Defensively, they did let up quite a bit of yards, but they only let up 14 points off of those yards, so you're not really too upset about that. And then once, of course, Bryce Perkins was amazing as always, so the Panthers dominated this week. They dominated the best team in the league previously, the DC Defenders, so they're obviously going to be number 1. Moving on from there, we have our standings, which we are very consistent in both conferences, right? We got 2 teams at 4-2 in the XFL, Defenders and Battlehawks. Renegades at 3-3, and then Brahmas at 1-5. In the USFL, you got the Stallions and Panthers, both at 4-2. The Roughnecks at 3-3, and the Showboats at 1-5. Brahmas and Showboats are almost effectively eliminated from playoffs. They could be officially eliminated from playoffs after this week. Moving on from there, we have our quarterback power rankings. I'll move out of the way here. We don't have a whole lot of movement this week. As you can see, the top 8 guys stayed the exact same. Bryce Perkins, Jordan Teamu, Louis Perez, Manny Wilkins, Dresser Wynn, Jalen McClendon, Nolan Henderson, and Matt Corral. Right, Bryce Perkins was amazing, so obviously he's going to stay at number 1. Louis Perez did have 3 turnovers this week, so I almost thought about putting him below Manny Wilkins, but I didn't want to do that quite yet. It is pretty close, though, now. Also, Dresser Wynn, Jalen McClendon, I feel like are trending upwards towards Manny Wilkins, so if they have another good game next week, they could easily pass him. Then looking at number 9, we got Case Cookus, who jumped up 3 spots ahead of Max Duggan, Troy Williams, and Kellen Mond. He played really good this week. He had 2 touchdowns, 170 yards, so hit the best game of his season so far, so of course he's going to be moving up. Then we got Max Duggan at number 10. He moved ahead of Troy Williams and Kellen Mond, but he did move below Case Cookus. So he does technically move up just 1 spot here, although he did jump 2 guys. He wasn't amazing. He had 150 yards total with 1 touchdown, but he did have a fumble as well, and his completion percentage was very bad, right? Moving on from there, we got Troy Williams falling below those 2 guys. He didn't play this week. And then Andrew Peasley and Kevin Hogan both did not play before this week, and they actually played really solid. Andrew Peasley was actually really good in the limited drives he had. And he has 5 for 8 with 80 yards. That's pretty good for your first experience in the UFL. But he also had a fumble lost, and just because his very limited time, I could not really move him any higher than number 12. And Kevin Hogan was decent in his first start here. Like I said, I think he was better than any of those other Brahmas quarterbacks, so he slots in just above of Kellen Mond. Then again, we got Kellen Mond down here dropping below a lot of dudes. AJ Perry as well. He's going to drop below Peasley and Hogan. Basically, anyone else on this list is dropping 2 spots down below Andrew Peasley and Kevin Hogan. None of these guys actually ended up playing this week. Moving on from there, we have our attendance. So, as you can see here, St. Louis Battlehawks had about 26,000, which is 4,000 less than what they got as their previous season average. So they are trending downwards, but they're still at 26,000, which is better than all 3 of these other teams combined this week. So even if they are trending downwards a little bit, they're still easily the best fan base in the league. So you're not worried about them at all. Roughnecks and Showboats was an atrocious performance. Barely 4,000. This was a game the Roughnecks won. Roughnecks have been doing solid, the last 3-4 weeks. And they're playing one of the worst teams in the league, which would have given them a really good chance of winning. And they still can only get 4,000 guys in seats. That's bad. Panthers and DC had 11,000, so that's pretty good numbers there. Way above their season average. And then the Stallions Brahmas game was 500 above their season average. So trending upwards for Birmingham, that's a good sign. So overall, we do see a downtick from 14,000 down to 13,000. And that is mostly because of St. Louis and DC, or St. Louis and Houston dropping quite a bit. Then we have our TV viewership. I'll just move out of the way for this one. Renegades and Battlehawks on Friday night had 630,000 viewers on Fox, where our average on Friday night games have been 636,000. So right around the same area there. Pretty good. Showboats and Roughnecks at 874,000 on ABC. That is 70,000 above the ABC average, so that's a good sign there. DC and Michigan had 454,000 on ESPN. That's like 35,000 below the ESPN average, so not great numbers there. And then San Antonio and Birmingham on Fox had about 620, which is 23,000 less than Fox's average outside of Friday Night Football. So not great numbers there, but still overall this week, we actually have a 2,000 average increase over the previous averages of these broadcasts. So we're actually still trending upwards, even if we do see some downticks on the majority of these broadcasts. ABC kind of carries the load once again. But that is going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching. Make sure to check back next week for an updated power rankings list, and goodbye.